morning. We'll give everyone just a few minutes to get into the webinar, and then we'll get started. Good morning, and welcome to the next webinar in our property owner webinar series. Today, we're going to cover budgets, tax rates, and tax bills, and how you can plan and really impact your 2024 property tax bill that'll be coming out later this year. There is a Q&A section. If you have any questions, you can put your question there. And then at the end of the webinar, if the questions haven't been answered, we will go through and answer any remaining questions. So to kick things off, you really need a basic understanding of what the property tax system is. And so there are really three main players in that property tax system. The first is my office, the appraisal district, and we determine a market value for each property in Travis County each year. And our job is to determine that market value as of January 1st of each year. We then send out a notice of appraised value to each property owner, letting them know what their value is, what exemptions they have on their property, and then giving them information on how to protest that market value. The second player in the property tax system is the taxing units, and these are your cities, your school districts, the county, emergency service districts, municipal utility districts, water districts. And taxing units set a budget to provide services for their voting base, and then they set a tax rate to fund that budget. And that is what actually determines the overall property tax burden. And then the final player is the tax office, and the tax assessor collector is Bruce Elfont, and his office calculates and mails property tax bills and collects the property tax payment. They also handle vehicle registrations, license plates, voter registration, disability placards, and court costs. So the basic property tax calendar starts January 1st of each year. And January 1st is what's called the assessment date. And that just means that we set a market value as of that assessment date, January 1st. So what a property would sell for in the open market as of January 1st. Then appraisal districts start sending out those notices of appraised value around April 1st. And this process does take a few weeks, generally 3 to 4 weeks to get all 450,000 notices mailed. And then May 15th is the general protest deadline. So if you disagree with the value that's provided on your notice of appraised value, you can protest, and that generally the deadline to do that is May 15th of each year. Then we go through the summer at the appraisal district, and we meet with property owners. The appraisal review board hears formal hearings, and then by July 25th, the appraisal district certifies an appraisal roll to each taxing unit. The taxing units then use this information throughout August and September to set their budgets and tax rates. And this is the part of the calendar that we're in right now. And you've probably seen in the newspaper or on the news here lately, different taxing entities explaining what their budgets are for the upcoming year, their tax rates, letting you know about public hearings they're having. So that's that step in this process that we're in right now. And then in November, voter approval elections or VATER elections are held on the general election date, which is the first Tuesday in November. And there are some provisions of the tax code that require taxing units to get voter approval for a tax rate. We'll talk about those in just a few minutes. And then after that voter approval election, the tax office starts preparing and mailing tax bills. And then property tax bills are due upon receipt, but become delinquent on January 31st. So that's the date we all remember. We have to pay our property taxes before January 31st. And if you don't, then you start getting penalties and interest on February 1st. And in calculating your property taxes, there are really three factors that determine the amount of taxes that you'll pay each year. The first is the appraised value, which is the value that is set by the appraisal district. The second factor is any exemptions that the property or the property owner might qualify for. And exemptions are administered through the appraisal district as well. And then the third factor is the tax rate, which is set by the taxing units to fund those budgets for services. So the appraisal itself, the purpose of it is really just to determine how much your tax burden will be, and allocate that burden fairly amongst everyone so that someone who has a mobile home isn't paying the same amount of property tax as someone who lives in a $1 million home. And in calculating the property tax, it's a very simple formula. You take the taxable value times the tax rate, and that gets how much in taxes owed to each taxing entity. You calculate this for each taxing entity. So you'll do it for the county, for your school district, for your city, and then add those all together to get your total tax burden. And the Texas Constitution affirms the concept of truth in taxation. And what does that mean? For at least the past 4 legislative sessions, taxpayer transparency has been a continued effort at the Capitol. Local taxing entities have had many statutory requirements passed to make taxpayers aware of their budgets and the tax rates they're setting, and then how those rates are going to impact the taxpayer. There's also been a big push to give taxpayers the opportunity to limit increases in the property tax bills and provide their communication back to the taxing entity, their feedback. The budget and tax rate setting process is very, very complex and cumbersome, and it's hard for taxpayers to follow all those key dates and deadlines that have to get tracked. And so to assist with this transparency aspect, the Truth in Taxation website concept was developed. And here in Travis County, that website is travistaxes.com. So each appraisal district in the state maintains a website for their taxing entities to enter their tax rate and budget information into. And you can find any other county by going to texas.gov/property taxes, and you just select which county website you want to look at. So again, here in Travis County, our website is travistaxes.com. And on the main landing page, you can enter an address, an owner name, a property ID, and then it'll pull up some property specific information. The first thing you're going to see once that property's pulled up, you'll see the property ID, the owner name, the property address, and then the current market value of the property. If the market value is showing 0, then the property is still under protest. Values get updated typically weekly. So once you complete your protest and you have your hearing with the appraisal review board and you get a final value from them, you can expect to see that market value updated within a week. You'll also see a link in the top right-hand corner to register for notifications. And this link will direct you to the owner portal where you can sign up to receive notifications when information is updated on the TNT website, the Truth in Taxation website. And those changes include changes in the market value of the property, the taxable value of the property. If one of the entities that you're taxed by, if they update a tax rate or update a budget hearing, you'll get an email notification letting you know that something's changed so that you can go back in and look at your Truth in Taxation for your property. The next thing you'll see is the section that provides some summary information and the estimated property taxes. So the summary screen will show you the amount of taxes you paid in the prior year, and then the tax if each entity adopts the no new revenue rate, and we'll talk about what that rate is here in just a second, and then an estimate of your 2024 taxes using the proposed tax rate that the entities have entered. You can see a year-to-year change in the tax bill, And this process is an ongoing process. So there are times when you'll see a not available for one of your entities. That just means that they haven't updated that information for their entity yet. So check back all through August if you're seeing some not available numbers on your property, and those will be updated throughout the month. Okay, so some key terms. You're going to see the prior year tax rate, which is just the tax rate that was adopted last year by the taxing entity. The no new revenue rate in this process that the taxing entities go through, the first thing they have to calculate is a no new revenue rate and then a voter approval rate. And the no new revenue rate just provides a tax rate that uses the current year's market value of all properties in their district, and it calculates a rate that will provide the exact same amount of taxes as last year. So if they're adopting or proposing a rate that's over the no new revenue rate, that means they're increasing taxes. The no new revenue rate just gives them the same amount of budget and revenue as the previous year. You'll also see the voter approval rate, and this is the tax rate limit. We said there were some limitations from each taxing entity on how much they could increase their tax rate. The voter approval rate tells them the rate in which they have to go and ask their taxpayers if they can get that tax rate. So anything higher than that voter approval rate requires the taxpayers to vote on that tax rate. The proposed tax rate is what the taxing entity is proposing. So that is what they're going to have their tax rate hearings on and their public hearings. And then the 2024 adopted rate will be filled in once the tax rate is actually adopted by the entity. So what does that look like in our truth in taxation? So you can see each entity in your TNT portal. For instance, this is for the city of Austin. And on the left-hand side, there's different modules that you can select. So the first is the rates. And here you're going to see those rates we just talked about. So last year's tax rate, this year's no new revenue rate, their proposed rate, the voter approval rate, and then eventually their adopted tax rate. And you can see the rate and the amount. So what you would pay in taxes using your taxable value gives you an estimate if they were to use that rate of how much you would pay. So for example, the no new revenue rate on this account is 0.4508. And using that rate and the taxable value, this person can estimate to pay $2,204.80 to the city of Austin for their taxes for 2024. When you see a difference column and there's an amount there, that's telling you the difference in the no new revenue rate, which again is the amount that would give them the same amount of revenue as last year, and the proposed rate, what they're proposing to adopt. So if there's a difference there, then there is an increase or decrease in taxes. And then the voter approval rate here is 0.4776, and using that rate, they can estimate to pay $2,335.87. So that's the highest that the highest tax rate that the taxing unit could adopt and not get voter approval. Anything above that rate would require a voter approval tax rate election. The next section is for any public hearings they're having. So you can see the date and time, the location of any budget hearing or tax rate public hearing. In the appraisal district office, we get 180,000 protests each year from property owners who are protesting their market value. But at a tax budget hearing or tax rate hearing, there might be 15 or 20 people that show up. It's our civic responsibility to be involved in these decisions that our taxing units make. And this gives you the opportunity to go to those hearings and let your elected officials know what's important to you. So you can find that under the hearings tab. You can also find the contact information for the taxing entity. So you'll get their website, an email address where you can email any concerns, or maybe you want to tell them that you agree with the budget they're proposing to adopt. You can email them there. There's also a phone number. And then the historical tax rates will show you for the last 6 years, what have they adopted? What was their no new revenue rate, voter approval rate, the proposed and actually adopted tax rates. And then the feedback section, I think, is probably the most important part of this truth in taxation. It gives you an easy way to provide comments and feedback to your taxing entities. You can leave them a message, provide your contact information, and tell them what's important to you. What services do you think are needed or could be cut? And that can all be done through this travistaxes.com website. For entities like school districts that have a tax limitation, you'll see that at the bottom right-hand corner. And so for all school districts, there's a state mandated tax limitation. And that just means that in the year that you turn 65 or disabled, and you get that over 65 or disabled person's exemption, your taxes will never go higher than that amount. And that's for school districts. So now your city and county could keep going up, but your school district taxes will be frozen. And so that information can be seen in the bottom right-hand corner of the entity if they offer one. And this November, there are several Travis County taxing entities that will need voter approval on items impacting your property tax bill. And voter approval has to come on bonds, and bonds just allow taxing entities a way to fund major projects. Before issuing any bonds that could impact a tax rate, they have to get voter approval. And then there's also voter approval tax rate elections, which are commonly called VADER elections, VADERs. And if a taxing unit wants to adopt a tax rate, again, that's higher than that voter approval rate, they have to go to the taxpayers and ask for approval through the election process. And currently, we know that Travis County is going to go out for a VADER, Austin ISD will go out for a VADER, and Manor ISD will be out for a VADER in November. And your vote could impact your property tax bill. It could add up to $600 on the property tax bill for an average home in Travis County. So it's important to be involved, go out and vote and show what's important to you. Tell your taxing entities what is important. You have a voice. So those budget hearings and the online feedback through travistaxes.com, that is occurring right now throughout August and September. The last day to register to vote is October 7th. So register so that you can participate in those voter approval tax rate elections and bond elections. And then the election day will be November 5th, 2024. And just a quick plug, we've got a last minute exemption clinic that's coming up at the end of August. It'll be Saturday, August 31st from 10 to 12 at the Travis County Community Center off Foothill Farms Loop in Pflugerville. Homestead exemptions are the easiest way to impact your property tax bill. So if you need assistance or you just have questions, we will be there to answer those and help you apply. And you can find more information on homestead exemptions on our website at traviscad.org/homestead exemptions. And with that, we'll answer some questions. And then if you could also provide us some feedback on today's webinar, you can use the QR code there or go to traviscad.org/event feedback and let us know how you felt about the webinar today, or if there's other items you'd like us to cover. So we'll answer some questions. And so just as a reminder, there was a question about notices of appraised value. Notices of appraised value go out in April of each year. So those were sent out in April, which had your market value and your any exemptions you might qualify for. We don't have any other questions. You have a few more seconds to get any questions in that you want answered. So there's a question about how a taxpayer could have an in-person meeting with an exemptions clerk. So our customer service department is available Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:45 to 4:45, and Tuesday and Thursday from 9 to 4:45. And our exemptions clerks are there in person or on the phone, and they can answer any questions that you have. And the webinar is being recorded. We'll have it up on our website later today. So you can rewatch it if you have some information you need to see again. There's a question about the protest process. So a prior year protest, so for 2023 back, if you have an appraisal review board hearing, and you get a decision there, then it takes up to 30 days for us to send the data over to the tax office, and then it can take up to 90 days to get a refund. But again, the appraisal district doesn't handle refunds. That's through the tax office. So if you have questions about that, you can reach out to them. So does the proposed rate need voter approval? And that depends. So the proposed rate is just what the taxing entity is proposing to the taxpayers. If it's above that voter approval rate, then they have to go to the election to the voter. If it's not, if they're proposing a rate that's under that voter approval rate, then it is just adopted by their governing body, so the city council or their board of directors. So we had a question about our hours of operation that can be found on our website at traviscad.org. And it's on our main page for our hours of operations. Does this process have to be done yearly? Yes, the taxing entities have to adopt a tax rate every year and set a budget every year. So every August, come back to that travistaxes.com website, and that information will be updated for the current tax year. So is the proposed tax rate the max we would pay? It is just the rate that's being proposed by the taxing entity. And that process is pretty complex and it can drag out, but they have multiple meetings with the city council or the governing body. And so what the proposed rate is could change. I mean, the city council could add services and the tax rate may increase. Or they could say that we want to save our voting based money, so we're going to decrease the tax rate. So it's just the proposal of what they're looking to adopt, but it could change up until that adoption point. Okay, well, that is all the questions that we have for today. Again, our customer service group is available to answer any other questions you have. They're available by phone, email, and in person. So if you have additional questions, you can reach out to them. And we thank you for joining us today.